morning, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. I'm Eileen Newman, the Executive Director of the Center for Bronx Nonprofits. Some of you probably have interacted with us, and if you did, then you know Meredith Minogue, who also works at the center, who's joining us on this. So we're very excited to be here, and I wanted to give you a little background about who put this together and what our goals are and what our expectations are for the experience that you're all going to have for the next few hours. So this is a collaboration between the JCRC New York chapter for the New York Interfaith United Coalition, and also with Hunger Free America and the Center for Bronx Nonprofits. So this began actually with a conversation that we had with Rabbi Bob Kaplan, who is from JCRC, the Jewish Council of Community Relations, and we've done a lot of work with them over the last 9 years that the center has been in existence. We've also been meeting with people from Hunger Free America, and the conversation was really about the whole issue of food justice and what some of us are also calling food sovereignty, with the idea of what's been happening in the food area. I think that there have been, from my perspective, there have been a lot of changes and growth. So we have people who have been working in the food justice area for a very long time, and making sure that people get the food they need, working hard to keep food pantries, providing food pantries open, providing opportunities for people in a very grassroots way. And then the pandemic hit. And so the number of people who needed food desperately ramped up, as I'm sure that most of you know. I'm probably not giving any new news to anybody on this call. And so there are organizations that had not previously been really in the food or justice arena. They were committed to it in some ways, and they might have had some sort of relationship with food and the communities they serve. But more and more and more organizations found themselves in a position of having to give food to just keep people going in their communities. Just an anecdotal story that I always hold in my heart. One day I spoke to Eileen Torres, the executive director of BronxWorks, and they always had a food kitchen. They were always giving out food. But when the pandemic hit, and their food pantry opened at 9 o'clock in the morning. When the pandemic hit, people were online with their children at 3 o'clock in the morning so that they could be there when the pantry opened. And that's what we've been seeing all over the Bronx, and people fighting hard to figure out ways that didn't have to happen, that there was enough food. So when Rabbi Bob came to me, and Alyssa, who's also on this call from JCRC, came to me, and then Emilio Tavares also joined the conversation. We said, what can we do to bring people together? And that's what this day is all about. So our goals are to provide an opportunity to learn about what people are doing, but it's also an opportunity to find a way to work together, because it may be that many people do know each other, but it may be because so many new people have entered this arena that you don't know each other. So we are very interested in figuring out a way of putting people together and having them work to provide even more opportunities in the food justice, food sovereignty arena. So that's the sort of basis of why we're here. And I'm going to introduce Joel Berg, who is the CEO of Hunger Free America, and he's going to talk a little bit about aspects of hunger and introduce the panel. So I'm happy you're all here, and please keep in touch.
Hello, this is Joel. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Census data is coming out today on poverty in America over 2020. We'll see what it says, whether Bronx is still the lowest income urban county in the United States. We know food insecurity data came out 2 weeks ago, hunger data, and what it showed was the only major thing standing between us and massive starvation in America was the rise of the Federal Nutrition Assistance safety net. And the truth of the matter is, while yes, the needs are more visible at food pantries and soup kitchens, the fact of the matter is the federal safety net really dwarfs everything that all the charities in America hand out. And so even before the pandemic, the federal safety net equaled 15 times the dollar amount of food distributed by every charity in America. Every soup kitchen, every food pantry, every food bank, every food rescue organization, and every mutual aid society equaled less than 1/15 combined. All those things combined equaled less than 1/15 of the Federal Nutrition Assistance Safety Net. SNAP, which used to be called food stamps, which serving over 1.5 million people in New York City today. WIC, the Women's, Infants, and Children Program for pregnant women and children under 5. The pandemic EDT program that was created in the pandemic to give food on the cards of parents whose families are out of school. And I would just say before introducing the panel that it's important to move beyond the stereotype that this was a brand new problem. As we know, before the pandemic, 35 million Americans lived in households that couldn't afford enough food. 35 million Americans before the pandemic lived in households that couldn't afford enough food. And in New York City, it was over 1 million people. And in the Bronx, a few 100,000 people. Our data shows that Bronx is the hungriest, or at least one of the hungriest, counties in the entire United States, certainly urban counties in the United States, because there's a lot of rural poverty. And the vast majority of people who are hungry in the Bronx are working. They're working hard and playing by the rules. They just don't earn enough to feed their families. And that is the great crisis in our country and in the Bronx. And it's just basic math. The minimum wage in New York is now $15 an hour in New York City. But unfortunately, plenty of undocumented immigrants and others are paid under the table at less than minimum wage, breaking the law, but that is the reality. And under New York state law now, if you are a tipped worker in a restaurant, you are paid sub-minimum wage, and you must rely on the tips to get you above minimum wage. If you're at a fancy restaurant in Manhattan, that may easily get you above the minimum wage every night of work. But if you're in a diner in the Bronx, probably not. So there are many, many people in the Bronx who are making even sub-minimum wage, even sub $15 an hour. But let's say you're making $15 an hour. It's about $25,000 a year for full-time work, that if you're paying, let's say, $1,500 a month in rent, if you're not lucky enough to have one of those Everett Windling rent-controlled apartments, you pay $1,500 a month for a one-bedroom apartment for you and your family, and that's not ridiculously high for the Bronx. That might even be average. That equals $18,000 a year for rent. So if you're earning $25,000 and paying $18,000 a year for rent, why are we shocked that you don't have a boatload of money left over for food, healthcare, transportation, childcare, which is really expensive, and prescription drugs. So hunger is an affordability issue. It's not a food distribution issue. Never in American history, at least since European settlement started, have we ever lacked sufficient food in this country. It's all about inequality of wealth. So we had this massive problem before the pandemic, and sometimes, the implications, it only became a problem in the pandemic when people say, it's not people you'd expect. It's not who hungry people you think look like. There's a real racial and class subtext to that. And we need to understand it wasn't rich people becoming poor and hungry in the pandemic. It was poor people and hungry people becoming poorer and hungrier. And it was people at the edge of poverty becoming poor and hungry. And now, as we're marginally recovering economically, you're seeing the people who were hungry before are still hungry. And that it's only the massive increase in SNAP, what used to be called food stamps, all these other government safety net programs, a massive increase in benefits, cash benefits to low-income people that saved the day. So yes, we need to make sure pantries and kitchens are well stocked as they fill in the gap, but we always need to understand we don't have to accept mass hunger in the Bronx or everywhere or anywhere with the only industrialized Western country on the planet that has it. New York City has a few dozen billionaires whose combined net worth is at least 3 times the entire city budget. So I hope we keep our eyes on the ball on what's needed. And I think if that is okay, I am going to introduce Emilio, and he will introduce the rest of our panel. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Emilio Tavares is the Director of Policy, Research, and Advocacy for Hunger Free America. He is a trained social worker, and you've probably already met him on many a Zoom call or before the pandemic, many a meeting. He is everywhere at once, organizing, spreading the message of social change. So take it away, Emilio. And thank you all for coming today.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And I already see some collaborations happening in the chat. Please keep it going. I'm very good at keeping an eye on that. And just to kind of tie together everything we've said so far, I think the pandemic really shed a light on this issue specifically of food, people not being able to afford it. The food pantries and soup kitchens became a lot more visible, and we saw federal programs expand. So I think all these different, and also mutual aid efforts that are unofficial food justice efforts have also popped up all over the country. So I think to reiterate what Eileen said at the beginning, that we really want us to collaborate more. Every food pantry and soup kitchen should have benefits enrollment, and there should be this kind of coordination. And so to talk about different ways to do that, we've invited several panelists that do this kind of work. Starting with Christina Hansen from Part of the Solution. She is the CEO, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, Emilio. Thank you so much. My name is Christina Hansen. I'm the Executive Director of Part of the Solution. We're a multi-service agency in the Northwest Bronx, located close to Fordham University. And we serve food, but we do quite a range of other things, as Joel and Emilio had discussed earlier. Thank you for being here today.
And then we have Allison Marino with Phipps Neighborhood.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Marino. I run Bronx Impact at Phipps Neighborhoods, and I run Bronx Impact's Food Access Collective. Phipps Neighborhoods is also a multi-service social service agency, mostly focusing on the South Bronx. And the Bronx Impact Food Access Collective mostly works to lift up disparities, particularly through data about access to quality, nutritious, culturally relevant choices in our Bronx neighborhoods.
Thank you. And last but not least, Lucy Mercado from Church of the Mediator. Lucy, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lucy Mercado with the Food Justice Ministry at Church of the Mediator. We've been in operation now for a little over a year. Prior to COVID, our focus was accessing, helping with accessing fresh local organic foods through our farmers market, Kingsbridge Riverdale Farmers Market. But on the onset of COVID-19, I shifted into emergency food because so many, including myself, were left without work, left without food, access to food. And the Food Justice Ministry was started through a community.
Is
Hello?
one of the
Hello?
Sorry,
Hi,
keep going.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, keep going.
Oh, okay. I thought I was having a connection issue. Okay. So the Food Justice Ministry started through a community mutual aid effort. And we were approached through the North Bronx Collective, which is a mutual aid. And then from there, we just grew with and collaborated with other mutual aids. It is, our efforts are graciously sponsored from Church of the Mediator and Episcopal Charities. And, our mission is to not only be able to provide food to people, but to empower our community and develop community health and resiliency.
Can you just tell people what the time, like if people are looking for services, when should they come?
Oh, okay. So our hours have changed due to the fact that we have a reduction in volunteers returning to work. But our food pantry is on Fridays, 2:30 to 4:30. And our focus is, giving access to healthy foods. I know that prior to us operating, we did have another food pantry that was operating out of Church of the Mediator, but most of it was just like non-perishables, cans, and so our focus is on giving folks the access to just much fresh and wholesome foods.
And Christina, could you talk about POTS and the hours of operation? Again, if people want services, when should they come? And for what?
Sure. So if you're looking for food access, POTS is a food pantry that operates 6 days a week from 8 until 11. And then we also have a community dining room, which serves hot meals in the afternoons from 12:30 until 3:30, Monday through Saturday. The food pantry is also Monday through Saturday. In terms of accessing things like SNAP benefits and other types of case management services, it's easiest at the moment if you call a receptionist. So if you access our main line, 718-220-4892, extension 101. And our receptionist has been getting back to everybody, trying to schedule appointments. We have some in-person appointments, some we do over the phone.
And then Allison, same question. Can you talk a little bit about the services FIPS provides and hours of operation?
Yeah, FIPS Neighborhoods has a lot of services that are recruiting right now, especially. We've got after school and early childcare programs recruiting right now. You can jump on our website or our social media for flyers, which list based on which location you're closest to, who directly to reach out to. I will also put my email in the chat and I can triage anybody wherever they're looking to go. Our Melrose Food Pantry predominantly serves residents of FIPS houses buildings, but I can also link you in with our case managers based on whatever neighborhood you're closest with, and we can get you set up with somebody who can triage you over to wherever you're looking for. And also Bronx Impact has a really great resource search and referral platform. If any of FIPS neighborhood services are not right for what you're looking for, I'll put in the chat as well the link to my.bronximpact.org, where you can search by zip code for anything you or a client of yours may be looking for, and usually do the referral right through the site.
Okay, great. And so I think, part of the reason I ask for that is because the pandemic has caused a lot of programs to shift operations. And before the pandemic, there were over 1 million people in New York City hungry. Can each of you, starting with Allison, talk about how the onset of COVID changed your day-to-day?
Sorry, I typing in the chat at the same time. Yeah, actually the onset of COVID completely changed my day-to-day. I launched the Bronx Impact Collective Impact Initiative in Community District 6 on behalf of FIPS Neighborhoods in December 2019. I was doing a huge data culling and analyzing mission, and I was doing a big community listening tour. And I had been hearing both from the data analysis and from our community members, you know, people who worked for us, people who used our services, people who had nothing to do with FIPS Neighborhoods, elected officials, our community board members, et cetera, that there were 3 big areas that they would like to see some collective impact taking place in. Something in the area of public safety and criminal justice, something in the area of economic upward mobility, including the career pipeline and the education system, and something around increased access to affordable, nutritious, healthy food. We have 1 supermarket to every 37 bodegas in Community District 6. So those topics were all, huge walls of notes in my office. And then March happened. I'm finishing up my listening tour. I'm getting ready to put things together to say, which of these are we going to focus on and how? Pandemic. And sitting at home, I'm trying to play this backbone role, right? In collective impact, what we consider the backbone is somebody who builds capacity around people doing work on the ground. We try to be the administrative or the partnerships connection or the policy arm of groups that are doing the work and don't have time for those pieces necessarily. And as I was dropping into community meetings and community groups and helping mutual aid pieces come together and listening into what elected officials were asking for people on the ground to activate for them, food was so obviously the piece that needed the most help, exploding in terms of community need, and also where all hands were on deck. And it was just so obvious that, we could not ask anybody to step away from the front lines there. If you were feeding people, you needed to stay there. And if higher level systemic issues needed to be addressed, someone was going to need to come to you to ask you questions and then go do the back end work. And that was where I slotted myself in. And when I put out the call to the Bronx community and said, anyone who cares about food, people who need food, and people who are having trouble accessing food, and why this has ballooned to the problem it has because of the history of food access issues we have had in this borough, let's come talk. And the interest really exploded from there. The list of issues that needed to be addressed historically and their current, impact on our community really went nuts from there. And we've really enjoyed being able to bring people together to continue to discuss and push that stuff from there. And that's how COVID made that happen.
Yeah, and so we bumped into each other in a lot of coalitions and advocacy work that it sounds like you weren't doing prior to the pandemic.
Correct.
Similarly, Lucy, you were saying that prior to the pandemic, you weren't necessarily doing food distributions or anything. Can you talk about that transition?
Sure. Yes, we were not focusing on that at all because at the time, like 8 years ago, when we started the farmers market, there was a lack of access to like organic produce and no farmers market in Kingsbridge. So what shifted was the fact that so many were left without work. The pantry that was operating out of Church of the Mediator also shut down. 50% of the pantries in the Bronx were shut down due to COVID. So it was really just an emergency, and we needed to act fast. So, I'm just grateful for the mutual aid efforts in the community just to get the Food Justice Ministry started at Church of the Mediator.
Thank you. And then Christina, I used to work at POTS for everybody in the group. And so I remember that, case management and pantry and the dining room, they were all very in-person activities. So can you talk a little bit about how things have changed?
Absolutely. Yeah, we had about 800 people coming through our building on any given day. We didn't use an appointment model. It was all first come, first served. So there was often a crowd of people waiting for case management services, legal services, depending on the day. And we had to shut down the building. Basically, we continued serving food out the front door, pre-bagged meals, and we, in fact, expanded our service quite significantly. We went from the year before the pandemic, we served 1.1 million meals. The next year, we served 2.3, and now this most recent year, we've served 2.7. And so it's really been a huge increase in food output. And there's been an amazing community response, a lot of people thinking about food. And so that's been extremely valuable for POTS, for our neighbors in need. But one of the things that has become more challenging is, of course, these connections. It used to be that if you came to our pantry, you went straight to a case manager and you had the opportunity to do an intake on SNAP, an intake on public assistance. There was a whole screening, and it was all the public benefits. And of course, as you've said and other people have said, the issue with hunger in the Bronx is not that there isn't sufficient food around. It's not that a wave of locusts has come and eaten all our crops. It's that people don't have enough money and that there's income inequality. And so making sure that we connected everyone who came to the pantry to whatever financial public benefits were available to them really had a much deeper impact on their ability to eat over the long term. And so we still do that, but it just became much harder doing it over the phone. And so some things that helped, one of the government things that helped was that no longer did people have to recertify for SNAP during the pandemic. So fortunately, there were no longer recertifications. People were able to continue to receive the SNAP benefits that they had received prior to the pandemic. And we did do a lot of enrollments, new enrollments for people who maybe needed it now, who hadn't been eligible before. But we also connected people with other types of cash benefits. And also we did extensive cash distributions for people who didn't have access to any benefits. So for the undocumented population. And so we continue to do those services over the phone. We've started doing it again in person. We've had booths outside to answer questions. We've tried because we really think that that in-person touch is important. A lot of our clients aren't that able to use, either they have cell phones, but no computer, or their cell phones don't work that well. And so the connections are challenging in a pandemic, but we did it. We got access to $7 million in public benefits, even in the midst of that. And we helped prevent evictions, and we got access to help people make sure they could pay their rent. And so making sure those pieces are there continued to be extremely important in figuring out how to do that, because the food is a Band-Aid. It's the other income supports. It's the idea that people can't make their rent. And that's where the need for food really comes in our community.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about that, how the pandemic affected the referral process, because there used to be FIPS and POTS are examples of one-stop shops where you come in, let's say, to pick up groceries or for a hot meal, but then you stay and stick around or find out about other touch points. We see the same thing with mutual aid organizations, a lot of people who just took it on their own to help their neighbors. And what I noticed from that community also is they were not aware of what food resources or nonprofit services were within their sphere. But if it would be helpful if those efforts connected people to additional services right away, rather than having to do an email or a phone call or something like that. So that's a big takeaway for me. But moving ahead, I guess, given all the changes and all the challenges of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of federal action, right? Christina touched on, recertifications being waived for a period of time. In New York City, thankfully, people can submit their documents and apply online. I do a whole training on behalf of Hunger Free America for anybody that's interested on SNAP eligibility, to try to take people a little deeper into the program and just find out like what documentation is required and who is actually eligible, because there's a lot of misinformation. Happy to talk more about that. But just for our panelists, starting with Christina, what would you like to see? I think we're in an interesting place where the pandemic is over, but we still see a lot of challenges with this work. So what additional response would you like to see from the city or state?
So I think, recently the amount of SNAP benefits is going up on October 1st, I think. And I think that's great. As a federal policy thing, some of this work around benefits for families with young children will really make a huge impact on child poverty in the Bronx. Even in 2019, in December of 2019, the unemployment rate in the Bronx was 4.4%, which was a historic low. But even so, in our neighborhood, 50% of families with children were living below the poverty line. And so having access to more cash assistance for those families would really be transformative, and it would give families the opportunity to build stronger futures for themselves, because they're not constantly thinking only about how do I find food next. And so those types of federal responses are really important. And just, there's so many different areas that were highlighted. The digital divide, making sure that people understand how to access SNAP and when they're eligible, but also from POTS's point of view, and we've been working with the Excluded Worker Fund quite extensively, a very high percentage of hospice clients. We serve 40,000 people a year. Many of them are not eligible for benefits because of their immigration status. And so trying to figure out how do we serve our immigrant populations in New York, immigrant populations with children as well. If your child is a U.S. citizen, you can get SNAP benefits, but even so, there's just a dearth of resources in that community, and they're such a backbone for our city. And I don't know what the right policy is, but there is work to be done there.
But that's good that you mentioned the excluded workers fund. So they are taking applications now. Anybody who lost employment due to the pandemic and isn't eligible for certain things. I'll also mention that WIC has no immigration restrictions. So that's another piece that we highlight, but these are federal policies. So definitely, thank you for mentioning that. Allison, same question. What more response would you like to see from the city and state?
I think the policy angles that Christina just highlighted are some of the most important pieces. Expanding benefit access and levels is the foundation here. Without expanding those, a lot of the other solutions that come from that aren't possible. If we can get those done permanently, the child tax credit, excluded workers benefits, increasing SNAP benefits permanently. I'm really excited about the updates of the Thrifty Food Plan. It's going into effect for October. Still, though, that brings us from if you're using SNAP and you're dividing that out for your, average meal cost, when you go food shopping, you're going from $1.40 per meal to $1.60-ish per meal. I mean, an increase is an increase, and I shan't spit in the face of that increase, but it's still, that's not a huge relief to anybody on that type of budget, I don't think. I would really also like to see the purchasing power of those benefits increased, especially in neighborhoods where accessing your supermarket is not easy. Where I know communities where we're taking 2 buses and 2 subways just to get to the nearest supermarket that actually is a place where you can swipe your SNAP card. And what we're talking about for prices and access to culturally relevant items at those supermarkets is also not what we would like for our community members to be spending or accessing. I personally would love to see someone be able to swipe their SNAP card at their green cart on the corner, where the produce is the freshest and cheapest out of everywhere, and where the person running that green cart is potentially an immigrant and almost definitely a minority, and we're keeping the dollar really floating inside of that community. To me, that's, once we get the money in the coffers, that's expanding its purchasing power. Part of that for me is also people who are in charge of deciding who gets to spend what and where and how much they should be allocated for that spending. It's a lot about thinking about how those people shop and changing minds about where is healthy and what is okay and what is the right way to do this. And I think we have a lot of work there to do as well, but we are starting slowly, I think, to make some moves in that area. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Well, yeah, just to highlight some of the things, definitely, we need to tackle the digital divide. More people need cell phones and online services. Like being able to use your benefit. It's great that SNAP benefits went up, but being able to use them anywhere, even online. SNAP Online is still being tested essentially. But Lucy, what would you add to the conversation? Any policy or any response that you would like to see from the city or the state?
Yeah, I think that it should be a crime that food goes to waste. I seriously believe that should be a crime. And from a faith lens perspective, we are throwing away God's blessings, literally. And it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. How is it legal for supermarkets to throw out perfectly good food? What I would like to see on a city and federal level is to be able to have non-for-profits and their infrastructures to rescue food that would otherwise go to a landfill.
Yeah, and I think in general, those are things that are being looked at in terms of sustainability. And so I thank you for bringing also the religious aspect to this, because I think many organizations that do food justice work started out with some sort of faith background. Is there any particular teaching that you would all share with our viewers that inspires your work?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. You can start.
Above all, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself.
Allison?
Yeah, I do want to disclose that Phipps neighborhoods and Phipps houses have no religious ties whatsoever, but I'm Jewish and I personally live by the Jewish value of Tikkun Olam, which means to repair the world. And I very much agree with Lucy. You know, there are countries and there are cities that are making laws about food waste happen, and it's not at all impossible. And it is something that I believe we should be considering and moving towards. And in terms of repairing the world, redistributing food that isn't being used to its fullest extent and getting it to people who need it. We don't have a lack of food problem. We have a food distribution problem. And I would say, if anyone Jewish out there needs to choose one of the values to paste up on their wall, Tikkun Olam is definitely what drives me in this work. Repair the world, fix the circle.
And then I believe, and then part of the solution, I believe, has a Catholic origin.
Yes, origin. Yes, it has an origin. It was founded by a nun, a priest, and a Catholic layperson, and they came to the work using the ideas really coming out of the Dorothy Day movement of radical love, radical acceptance, and so we started out as a soup kitchen that served homeless people in the early 1980s, and the idea was to create a community and a place of acceptance for all of the people who came to POTS, and that idea still imbues the work that we do today. Because of the nature of our economy, we don't only serve homeless people anymore, though we still continue to serve homeless people. And that idea of being a loving community. So thinking of each individual as they come in, hearing from them, hearing about their experience, hearing about what they need and what they are, what their strengths are and their hopes and dreams is really an important part of how we develop all of our programs. But we are also not technically connected to the Catholic Church.
Right. These are all still the personal views of the individual panelists, not the views of the organizations. And then my last question, just to wrap up this portion of the event. After this, we're going to have some panel discussions so we can really hear from you all what you are taking away. What would you like to hear more after this? What follow-up you would like to see? The final question I have for you all is, how can we support your work? I'll start with Lucy. How can we support what you're doing at the Church of the Mediator?
I would say rescue would be great. City Harvest basically dropped us and many other organizations through their emergency COVID-19 funds. Also, City Harvest, it doesn't make sense if the Bronx is the poorest borough. Why is there not enough service from City Harvest in the Bronx? And for the first time in the Northwest Bronx, we had gotten City Harvest to come up here to serve this side of the Bronx. And also, it's always this, just because of our close proximity to Riverdale, which is a much more affluent community, it's that association that there's no hunger going on here. And that's a shame, because we've had folks who, even if they have a nice condo that they inherited from their family, they're going through hunger. They're part of our food distribution line. So yeah, I would say pressing on City Harvest to, I don't know, I know there's a long waiting list right now for them to take on other organizations. But I would say, yeah, to basically, we need the infrastructure to be able to rescue food. And City Harvest has that. Maybe creating more of that. I know I did some dumpster diving, rescuing for the first time.
Going out again?
But I cannot.
Gotta go back to church. Like I gotta leave like a.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, but yeah, like I'm not physically able to do that all the time. So we need drivers, I would say, more than anything. Lots of drivers to be able to rescue food, and that's
sounds like. Go ahead. Oh,
and that's the and drivers.
Okay,
And,
no, please. Sorry, I think you froze a little bit.
Oh, okay. I would say, to be able to figure out funding for drivers that are willing to do this food rescuing.
So just to summarize, it sounded like infrastructure support, right? Like how to move food and get it to the right people in your area.
Yeah, like there should be no reason why there's food rotting at Hunts Point Market.
You're trying to get away from me.
Yes, that's it.
Allison, how can we support your work?
That was my first.
You can join our meetings. The Bronx Impact Food Access Collective meets currently once a month on the third Tuesday of the month-ish. We're meeting next Tuesday if you'd like to join us. I'll put my email address in the chat again, or you can chat me yours and I'll send the invitation out to you. Also, if our meeting is not for you, basically, our feeling is people closest to the problem should be closest to the solutions. So keep doing your work and let somebody who is in an advocacy role know that you're doing work and know that you have solutions or know that you've identified barriers. If it's me, if it's somebody else in your borough, if you're not in my borough, I have people in my coalition who are not even in the Bronx. It's important to let someone know what's going on with you and to use your voice, even if it's not directly to people in power, as the data for the people who are doing that go-between work, because we need to tell people in power what's going on for you so that they can use their power to remove those barriers and to make choices that promote your ability to do great work. So yeah, either join me, join another coalition. If that's too difficult because you're too busy doing great work, send someone an email, leave someone a voicemail. We rely on your input to do our work well and for it to actually make a difference for the people that you serve.
So in other words, everybody make your voices heard, either reach out to Allison and speak to her about what your priorities are, speak to me. I just put my email in the chat. Happy to continue this discussion after this. Christina, how can we support you and POTS in continuing your work?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, through your individual groups, if you want to learn more about the ideas of hunger and income inequality in the United States, anybody on this panel certainly could talk to you more about those issues and help you learn more about what's going on. I've found that I've had the opportunity to speak to a couple of churches and synagogues about the work POTS does and our learnings from the work and how we learn from our community. And it really opens people's eyes. Often, if you don't have to think about the issue, you may not, and always good to learn more. And the other thing is, volunteer. Lucy mentioned that her organization is struggling to stay open because there's a reduction in volunteers. A lot of places have figured out how to do it safely. POTS is one of those places. And it's a really great opportunity and experience to really tangibly understand what's going on in the food system. I think one of the things that even just the basic, how heavy is serving 150 families with food every day? What does that look like? How do you get those different nutritional aspects together? How do you think about the logistics of all of this food, the infrastructure? How do you think about, if you get the opportunity to talk to a family, what is going on with them, and how do you learn from those people and make yourself a better advocate for the community? I think volunteerism is a really wonderful opportunity to do that wherever you do it.
Thank you. That's a good point. We need people everywhere doing all sorts of things. I think all of our organizations also need additional funding so that we can continue what we are already doing. So if you are in the capacity to donate, please do so. I think I'll end on the speaking for Hunger Free America. One thing that we want to see is more funding from government at the city and state level on benefits outreach specifically. as I mentioned throughout, there's a lot of misinformation about who is and isn't eligible for SNAP benefits, WIC benefits, rental assistance. So I encourage everybody to contact a council member and speak to that specifically. One big worry for us is that last year there was an increase in funding, I think, for a number of these initiatives: emergency food, benefits access, and City Council is currently set to not renew, cut a lot of that funding. So that's why you hear, Lucy no longer has a connection with City Harvest. Maybe it's a funding issue there. Our funding is going to be cut by about 79% from last year. And so definitely encourage you to follow us all on social media. Everybody's posting their handles in the chat. You can also find us on our websites. I'm the policy director for Hunger Free America. And like I mentioned at the earlier, we have a SNAP pre-screener training that's completely free to community members. I really just want to get the information out there because oftentimes people will need the assistance and say, oh, well, that's not me, or that's not for me, or I'm not eligible for whatever reason. And then the conversation stops there. So I think, this is one conversation that we're having about food justice in the Bronx. So this is just the beginning. We look forward to sending you the recording from this conversation, as well as following up about whatever you might want to see us do in the future. So with that, I will pass it over to Alyssa Hartstein from JCRC, who's going to break us out into our panel breakout groups.
Thanks, Emilio. Hi, everybody. So we're all going to go into breakout rooms for about the next 30 minutes. So until about 11:21 by the time I finish talking. And the breakout rooms really are meant for people to talk about who they are and what they're doing around this work. There will be facilitators in each room comprised of panelists, other organizers for this, but really the goal is to share who you are, what you're doing, and what need you have to keep doing this work. So without further ado, I am going to open up those rooms.
And so I'm here to wrap it up. And my name is Rabbi Bob Kaplan. I am the executive director of something called the Center for Community Leadership at the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. And we are also the folks that help to run Interfaith United. And Interfaith United is a bringing together of interfaith groups and faith groups throughout the city to address issues of commonality. And food justice, we literally started to organize during COVID. So we've never been live. We've always been Zoomed. I guess we're live, but we're virtually live, not never been in person. And one of the issues that came to the fore as we began to get together and hear the concerns of all the various different faith groups throughout New York, of course, was the issue of food justice. And we helped to put together forums and initiatives in Queens and in Brooklyn, and now in partnership with the Center for Bronx Nonprofits, which I also am one of the founders of and involved on the board. And the work that the center does is just stellar over at Ostos Community College. We pulled this together. And we never like to make promises we can't keep. I think that's actually more detrimental than making promises. If you make promises you can't keep, people fall back into the world of despair, and there's so much despair around in any event. We hope to pull together affinity groups, as we have done in Queens and in Brooklyn, for people to learn to work with each other. I'll give you an example. What happened in Brooklyn, there was a small pop-up food pantry in Park Slope. They met a couple of the other more established food pantries in other parts of Brooklyn, and they are now working hand in hand with each other to really bring the processes forward. And now with Hunger Free America, they've learned more about SNAP and the kinds of other opportunities they can bring. We don't suppose, and we don't pretend to say that we can solve the problem, the big problem. We hope we can be part of, to steal the other, or to borrow the other organizations, we hope to be part of the solution. And I think that that notion of being part of the solution is really the nature of what a coalition is all about and partnership is all about. In the breakout session that I was part of, I heard some really important words. But the most important word that I heard was dignity. That folks who, Rabbi, I think I misquoted the New Testament or just sort of side quoted it about the existence of poverty and the existence of folks who are going to be in need, and the fact that that is a common thing and that happens throughout history. However, when we interface with folks, we have to make sure that all the systems that we put in place, whether it's a very localized system as a pantry or hot meals or distribution of food and some kinds of foods on a very local level, or asking people for information, or signing up for the SNAP benefits, or anything else where there is a need upon one side and there seems to be a giving on the other side. It has to be done with dignity. And then perhaps that's something we can begin to, put into the trainings that we'd like to bring to folks, is some dignity training, because people need that. We need to be able to learn and to how to bring dignity to everyone. Dignity is a human right. It certainly freedom from hunger is a human right, but it has to be done with dignity. Has to be done absolutely with dignity. So that's an important statement that came out of this. The other thing that came out was, of course, and I was really lucky that Joel Berg was part of the group. I was lucky that everyone was part of the group that I was in, that I was facilitating. And the notion that folks brought up, and of the issue that folks should be able to purchase food on their own. They should have living wages. They should be able to earn enough money that they should be able to walk into a supermarket, and there should be supermarkets in all communities. There should not be food deserts. There should be open markets in all communities. There should be the availability of food in all communities, but people should be able to purchase the food that they like and that is healthy for them. And that is a broader agenda that we need to work with government resources and other elected officials and other decision makers to ensure that this is not being brushed under the rug, or when monies are being given, and rightfully so, for food pantries or other kinds of food opportunities, food justice opportunities, that the government feels, well, we did our job. We did our job. We gave enough money, and that's it. It's over. It's like we can go on to something else. Well, but that has to be changed as well, and that's going to take all of us to be able to effectively work together as advocates, as voters within the context of our society, and working with people who are really trying to affect policy within the context of where we're at. So people need to be able to get the kinds of training and the opportunities from a economic justice, so that there is in fact food justice. And that led to another conversation, is the issue of justice. This is about justice. People should be able to have justice within the context of the world. And so we have to take it a step back and say, are we providing justice to the people that are coming to us for help, or people that we're interfacing with through our churches, through our organizations, through our various different other initiatives that are helping to feed people? And can we learn from one another so that justice can be stronger in how we're achieving that within the context of our society? So that's going to be another piece of it. On October 5th, Hunger Free America and Emilio Tavares, and something I said to him offhandedly, not offhandedly, I said to him without prompting prior to coming on, that when I encountered Hunger Free America through both Emilio and Joel, it helped me to reshape my whole notion of what food justice is all about. The issue of sustainability, that we can provide intermittent or regular opportunities for people to get food and bags of food and hot meals. We have to be able to really help people get to the point where the issue is that food is a right, and it is a notion of justice, and that we have to be able to work within the context of sustainability. And that's something that we hopefully will be able to do. So on October 5th, Hunger Free America, through this consortium here, will be conducting a training on SNAP, on how to effectively access SNAP and help others to access SNAP. It is an incredible training. I've been through 2 of them already, and I think it would be really important for all of us and others to be part of that, because it's something that goes into our toolkit in helping to achieve the issue of food justice within the context of our society. So that's one. That's a very, very important one. And Alyssa Hartstein, I want to give a shout out to all the folks that helped put this all together. Certainly the folks at Ostos Community College, Eileen Newman, and then to Alyssa Hartstein, and to, I'm just getting the names wrong. I never should do this because I always get names wrong and miss out on people. But I will remember all the names in a second. Meredith Minogue, and of course the folks at Hunger Free America that has worked so closely with us there. Want to thank them all for helping to put this together properly, and all the various different panelists that were here before. This is the beginning of a process. We always have to start at a beginning and move it forward. There are so many amazing things happening within the context of food justice in the Bronx and citywide. We have learned more and more and more. And what we have learned is that each one of them did it out of a fullness of heart. And since this is, I'm speaking on behalf of an interfaith organization, and many of them did it out of either direct or indirect faith. You don't necessarily have to have, quote unquote, a religion to have faith, and or have faith in human beings and have faith in our common creation. And that notion of faith has allowed so many to take those steps that they need to take. So this is our contribution to the process. I myself live in the Bronx. This is the first time we're doing a forum in the borough where I live, which I'm very excited about. And again, Alyssa will be in touch with you, and she will be sending out to everyone who participated here and to others about the training on October 5th. You will also be hearing about our first affinity group meeting. It will be in October. My apologies is that this September is the month of Jewish holidays. It's almost it's a month that never was. We had like 7 or 8 working days, and of course it's the way I've described it is that somebody gave me an overnight bag and wanted me to pack 3 weeks worth of clothing into an overnight bag, and no matter how much you sit on it, it just doesn't fit. So right after October, we will be steaming forward and put together the affinity groups here in Interfaith United, and in total partnership with the Center for Bronx Nonprofits, looking to just further the work that you're all doing, and to make sure, and I'm going to end it with this, to make sure that everyone who has been affected by COVID or poverty or other issues in their lives, and we just don't know what some of those issues are, and we almost don't need to know what some of those issues are, but everyone has a right to have food justice in their lives. And we want to make sure that together on all different levels, from the sandwich that's handed out to the SNAP benefits that are handed out and everything in between, that people have what they need so their quality of life is exactly as human beings deserve. So I want to thank you all for being part of this today. Alyssa, did I miss anything? Do I have to catch up with anything here? I got it down. Very good. So thank you all. And we'll be moving this forward, and have a good day. And to everyone, and it's the Jewish New Year. I want to wish everyone a blessed year, a year of only success and deeper insights in the work that we're doing. Bye-bye now.